Have you ever wondered if it's possible to live in sync with your cycle? Do you struggle with a negative mindset around your period? Are you wondering if it's possible to be feminist and anti-birth control? We're going to explore these questions and so much more in the Managing Your Fertility podcast, because this is about helping you live a whole and full life. I'm your host and guide, Bridget Busacker, joining you in this journey of exploration related to women's healthcare, feminism, and fertility awareness. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, Lauren. Welcome back to the show. I'm excited to have you on with me.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Bridget.
So for those who don't know Lauren, I'm just going to do a brief introduction here. Lauren is a registered nurse and Marquette Method natural family planning instructor. She completed her Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Madonna University in 2009, practiced as a pediatric nurse until 2015, and has been teaching couples the highs, lows, and peaks of the Marquette Method since 2017. Lauren and her husband Giovanni co-founded Whole Mission, an online natural family planning education service. Lauren continues to provide fertility education to couples and women around the world, all while she follows her true calling of raising 5 fantastically unique children to hopefully become saints. So today, I'm just so excited to have Lauren on. We're jumping into the topic about ethics when it comes to fertility awareness instructors and what to look for in an instructor when you are making sure that your needs are met and you're trying to figure out how to best learn your method and, really navigating, are you trying to conceive? Are you trying to avoid and navigating those aspects of natural family planning. Unfortunately, we've identified, that there can sometimes be individuals who think it's their job to help you in your planning of your family. And we're actually going to get into the ethics around that and if that is ethical or not. And Lauren, as an instructor, is here to talk more about this. And she's very passionate about this topic. We've had some great conversations offline about this. So I'm really thrilled to have her on and speaking more to this issue. So let's get into it, Lauren.
All right.
So let's start off, what are natural family planning ethics? Like, what does that even mean for someone who's just hearing about this, or they may be in those really early stages of thinking, okay, I'm going to start charting my cycle. I'm going to pick an organization that teaches a particular method and work with an instructor. What the heck? Why are ethics important?
Yeah. So with kind of like with any profession, there is some sort of ethical code that's going to guide this relationship. So if you think of ethics with any sort of professional organization or a job, that it's like a code of conduct. It's a moral guide that's going to be showing somebody how to act within that relationship. So you probably know of like an ethical guide for nurses. Like that's what I had to review the code of ethics for nurses when I was in nursing school. My husband's a psychologist, so he knows a lot about the ethics surrounding mental health care and what goes into that. And with natural family planning, we're another professional relationship where we do have to have some sort of ethical guide that will show us the best way of approaching our clients and working with them in a way that respects them. And then also giving that guide to them so that they know what to expect from that relationship. Almost like a contract as you go into that relationship. So you know what you're going to get when you pay for that service from that provider.
Yeah. Awesome. I think it's sometimes, especially in the space of natural family planning, I think individuals can think that maybe doesn't apply or that, every practitioner does it their own way or in their own style. But, if you are working with, in a particular method with a particular organization, like your staff through Whole Mission, you are following a code of conduct. You really, you have to.
Exactly.
And it's important to do that. I think, especially when we're in this space of healthcare, I think sometimes you can forget like natural family planning, fertility awareness falls under like, this is actually healthcare. This is a part of that world. I think we can get so heavily focused in conversations around like the theology behind it or the spiritual aspect that we forget, okay, in a practical level as well, in the physical aspects, what we're navigating is very unique to each individual, and it's private information too. It's not meant to be shared with everyone, and it's definitely needing to have a respectful and positive relationship being built between instructor, practitioner, and user.
Yeah. And even if you look at natural family planning as a ministry, like, if you're coming from that theological perspective, it's not like ethics go out the window suddenly because you work for the church, like a youth minister still has to have an ethical code that's guiding them. So even if you take it from that ministry perspective, ethics are still important. And when you're really looking at natural family planning as both a ministry and a healthcare service, it's almost like you need double the ethics because we're held to even a higher standard then, because it's not just science, it's also our faith that's guiding us too.
Yeah, that's a really great point too. For NFP users, why does it matter for an individual user to be looking for that code of conduct to be in place and to make sure that like there is an ethical standard being followed? I know this is a loaded question.
Well, I mean, it matters because you deserve to have informed consent. So when you're going into a relationship, that professional relationship, you deserve to know what you're going to get and who's teaching you, where they're coming from, where did they learn, what are their credentials? Why are they able to teach you? And that's just for your own safety, essentially. You wouldn't go to a doctor who doesn't have a degree in medicine. You want to know that they're a medical doctor before you go and have them perform surgery on you. You want to know where they went to medical school, but you want to be, at the very least, be able to find those things so that you're going to be taken care of properly. Just like, again, with the ministry side of things, you're not going to go to some random person for confession. You want to know that it's a priest. So, you want to have somebody who's going to have the right credentials for the job that you're expecting. I think it's also important for users to understand, or, couples, women who are going to learn a method of fertility awareness or natural family planning. It helps them have a better expectation of what they're going to get out of that relationship with their instructor. So they're not going into that thinking like, oh, well, my instructor is going to give me advice on marriage. Like that's kind of outside of the scope of practice for an NFP instructor. And so when you have these ethical guides, then you know what you're going to get. You know kind of what your boundary is as a user of the method, where don't don't go outside of that scope of practice for them as well.
That's such a great point. Two-pronged. I mean, you have informed consent, which is really important, especially in healthcare. And I think we can forget that, but it's incredibly important. And then also boundary setting, appropriate boundary setting with your instructor too, to know, okay, what is their role? What are they tasked with? How are they supposed to help me? And then like you identified, there may be things that's outside of their wheelhouse, and they should be recommending, that you talk to someone else or that you seek something else out. Fertility awareness practitioner instructor is not a marriage therapist. So if there are issues that are coming up, in the process of charting and in discernment of family size, that may be a conversation that, they can point you to and say, hey, this may be a space where, this is where you need to maybe invite someone else in counseling or something like that, or a spiritual direction to be able to help you navigate some of those bigger questions. Because correct me if I'm wrong too. I mean, really an NFP instructor practitioner is meant to help you in the process of charting, making sure you understand the method and feeling like you understand the tools and you have the tools in your toolbox to chart successfully, to know what to look for in your chart. And they're there to support you if you find that, oh, there are some irregularities that need to be addressed. You do have questions about your health, or something isn't making sense that you're charting, or you're seeing some inconsistencies and you're wondering if maybe you need to have this, taken to the next level to have a doctor provide support, or a holistic practitioner just stepping in and helping you identify and navigating some potential health concerns too.
Exactly. Yes. So it's our tool as an instructor is really like looking at a chart with a couple. Like that's really like that's our bread and butter. But that doesn't mean we don't know about the other things, right? Like, yeah, of course we can see if a couple is arguing while they're talking about abstinence during the fertile window, like, hey, maybe there's some tension there, but we're not going to step in and say, now it sounds like you're frustrated about this, and try to counsel them as if we're a therapist. No, we might say like, oh, if you ever are looking for something, here's a resource for you. Or, if they ask for it, we can provide that resource, but we're not going to interject in some way that we're not qualified to do. And, I have couples ask me all the time for different advice about things. And I'll usually, if it's a friend that's different than, where it is that professional relationship. And we have resources though, especially if we're healthcare professionals, that's another limit that we have, where when we agree basically through that contract of teaching natural family planning, that's really what our focus is with that couple, where I'm coming to teach them a method and help them use it well and help them to understand it, and ultimately to become autonomous in that method so that they can use it on their own, really without my help, that they can really be independent. But if they need help beyond that, I can refer them to where they need to go. I have the resources at hand if they do have further questions about those things that come up, because it really is holistic. It's not just about when to avoid or achieve pregnancy. There are a lot of different issues that can come up. Most, I think pretty much all natural family planning instructors are going to have some resources for couples when they do have questions beyond, what's going on in my chart, how do I avoid or achieve pregnancy?
Yeah, I love that. And it's making me, think about too, as an instructor, I mean, having ethics and having these boundaries set for you helps you in your role in clarifying, like, what am I offering, what am I not offering? Because I can imagine it could be, tempting potentially, or just, wanting, you're seeing a couple struggling, you're going, oh my gosh, I just wish I could help you in this, depending on, where your passions lie. I think, if you're an NFP instructor, I think you're pretty passionate about helping people flourish, women in their health, couples in their marriage. So those ethics and the boundary setting is really helpful for you to know, okay, where's that line? Where can I help and where can't I help?
Exactly. Yes. And even as a Catholic woman too, that's sometimes a difficult boundary for me because I want to put my faith into everything. But I try to be really careful about that with the couples who come to me where I'm not going to push, like say, oh, well, you should pray about this. I'm not going to start that conversation. But if they ask, like if they bring it up first, if they say, oh, well, we're Catholics and, we have this particular question, that opens the door for me to kind of reveal myself as a Catholic at that point. But I really let each couple guide that conversation on their own. Of course, I would love everyone to be Catholic. I think it's the best. But I'm not going to make anybody have that conversation with me if they're not ready for that, if they're not comfortable to talk about their faith within that context as well.
I think that's such a great aspect to bring up too, because NFP is not something that is specific to Catholics. Although, I mean, obviously, in its name and its acronym, most people think, oh, it's that Catholic thing. It's that like thing that Catholics do in their marriage. And I get that. And I think that's okay. But I also am seeing these conversations, and I know you are too, where it's expanding, and we're seeing language around fertility awareness for women just wanting to learn their cycles. And for couples who are non-Catholic saying, gosh, this sounds like a really great tool to have in our marriage, to be able to understand our bodies and to figure out, like, how can we work together in, really honoring each other and loving each other well in this space. And for a lot of women, they're looking to ditch birth control. They're looking to find more natural, holistic ways to understand their cycle. And so I think that's an important aspect you bring up, is that this isn't just for Catholics, although, we know it's definitely supported and proliferated within the Catholic context, just given the understanding we have of sexual integrity and ethics within the Catholic Church too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when it comes to a code of conduct, you mentioned this, that there, ethics in place. Is this true for every instructor? Does it vary method to method? Does it vary based on the organization that is promoting a particular method? What does that look like? Is there a universal code of conduct, I guess, is my my larger question when it comes to NFP.
Yeah. So if there is, I don't know of it. So if there's like a universal, like if you teach fertility awareness, you must abide by these ethical rules, like the nursing guides for ethics. That if it exists, I would love somebody to send it to me because I have not seen it, and I'm trained as an NFP teacher. So what does exist though is that when a person is trained as an NFP instructor, whatever institution they learn through, they will have their code of conduct as you're taking classes. So I'm a Marquette instructor, so I took classes through Marquette University. So that's kind of a pretty obvious one. If you've gone to college, you know that there's educational guidelines, those institutional rules that you have to follow when you're at a university. So it's pretty apparent, like that sort of when you're learning the way that works. But once an instructor has been trained, it's going to be different for, every method is different. So I can speak to Marquette, what we had to do, that we learned through the Marquette University Institute for Natural Family Planning. But among all instructors, the only overarching guideline that's out there that I know of in the United States is the USCCB, so the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. That's a group of bishops, and they have these standards for NFP providers, and it outlines what's required of an NFP teaching institute, what's required of NFP teachers within a diocese, and this really only applies though to Catholic teachers who are in a diocese in the United States teaching natural family planning. And the other thing with this that's a little bit of a challenge is that you're not actually required to have an endorsement by the USCCB as an NFP teacher. It's just an optional endorsement that's out there if you meet all of these criteria. Now, as a Marquette Method instructor, we are obliged to follow them. That's one of the things that we learned through our training, that we follow those USCCB standards. So that's really what guides us within our practice. Now, outside of this, outside of natural family planning instructors within the United States, I don't know, in Europe or anything like that, if there are other standards, or as well for secular educators, if they have any sort of standards that guide them. I don't know of any. But I think something that is really good to look out for that might help, if you're trying to figure out where to learn and you want somebody who's trustworthy, see if that instructor is associated with some sort of professional organization, or they did learn at an approved provider for NFP education. So for example, the Marquette Method, we just this year developed the Marquette Method Professionals Association. So it's actually, that association that's going to eventually certify instructors who are members of this organization. And within that professional organization, we do have a code of conduct and an ethical guide for the members. So then whoever is a member of that association, that they're following those ethical guidelines, and that's going to be a good measure. I think the Creighton model also has a professional organization. It's like the American Academy of Fertility Care Practitioners. So that's another one that you can see if your educator is part of that organization as well. So that somebody is keeping them accountable, that there's some sort of format set up for them to be able to check in and have someone to check their ideas against. And if they're not following what they should be following, that there's somebody out there who may call them out on it as well. So yeah, look for those professional organizations if they exist. And then also in the US, we have that USCCB set of standards.
I think it's what you're bringing up is really important because it's really pointing out, a model for reporting too. So if you find that someone as an instructor may be, abusing or in misalignment really with a code of conduct that really makes sense and is respecting your relationship and your decision in family planning, if there's an issue with that, you have someone to go to say, hey, I'm noticing these things, or in our conversations, this isn't making sense to me. And you have serious concerns. This is beyond just like, they're just not a great fit for me, we're not connecting. It's like, I feel like boundaries are totally being overstepped. And I think that can be a little intimidating to think about as a user, like, how do I do this? And I know we'll get into like red flags to look out for momentarily here, but I think it's just important to note that and make sure that, it does help. And I know from my perspective, managing your fertility, I look to promote organizations that teach the different methods that I know are well-respected, well-known. They have, a variety of practitioners that are under an organization so that there is a structure for reporting, and they are, looking to, make sure that their instructors are actually following some type of code of conduct, and ethical training is in place so that you aren't, necessarily working with someone who's one-off. And I know some individuals do set themselves up in that way. That's not something I promote on managing your fertility, because I have seen some challenges in doing that. And I'm not talking about a particular instructor, teaching the Creighton model and having their own business set up in which they've been trained in Creighton and now they run like their own practice, or they have a group of instructors they're working with. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about someone who has either made up their method or has set up their method in a way that they're not connected with a larger organization or a larger part of their training. And they're just kind of making it their own without any type of overarching input or in training, honestly, in place. Because I have seen that come up. And I think I'd love for you to differentiate that a little bit more, because you can speak so much better to that than I can.
Exactly. Yeah. So ultimately you should be able to really simply figure out where somebody learned to be a teacher. And again, just speaking from how I was trained, I know that the USCCB has those approved providers. So that's a pretty easy place to look. But yeah, somebody could just, maybe they bought a book and they taught themselves how to use natural family planning, and they're really smart. Maybe they're a nurse or a doctor. And so they do have some professional credentials, and they're like, this is great, I'm going to start teaching people this. But then there's no accountability. It's just them coming up with stuff, and they're, and it may be great. It may be a great approach and like a really effective method. And it might be really holistic and all of these things and awesome, but there's no accountability. So if something goes wrong, who are you going to talk to? Just that person. And what's, what can you do? You could just call them out on it, and that's pretty much it. And try to not drag their name through the mud. Like, it's not really what we want to do. But yeah, really having that, like, if you look up somebody's name, you should be able to see where were they trained? What method do they teach? Have you heard of that method before? If you haven't heard of the method, can you find information about it? Because there might be a new method. Maybe it's just being researched and it's just developing, but you should be able to find some place where other people are teaching that method or know where they were trained, so that there is that accountability.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for clarifying that, because I think it's just really important, especially, I think, unfortunately, at times there have been conversations that happen online, or I've received emails from individuals where they're not associated with any organization, and they're really just kind of a one person shop, and they have not received formal training, and that just sets up a lot of red flags for me, which gets into my next question for you. So for a woman or a couple trying to find an instructor, and maybe they're trying to find one, or they're currently matched and they're realizing it's maybe not the best fit, what are the red flags to look out for? And again, this is beyond like, gosh, this person, we're just not really connecting well, this doesn't seem like a good fit. This is like overstepping boundaries, not following an ethical code, or you're questioning their ethics and their boundary setting and wondering like, is this okay? It's probably setting off a gut check where you're feeling disrespected, or you're finding that they're not respecting the boundaries that you have in place, and where you are in your learning process, and where you are, and honestly in your discernment process too, for your family life.
Yeah, I think kind of along what we were just talking about, like if they're making it difficult for you to know who they are, that's probably one really good red flag right there. You know, if they're obscuring where they learned or what method it is or what's the research behind it or all of that, like maybe look somewhere else. That's one thing. Like if it's cloudy, you know, you're not sure what's happening there, maybe move on to the next one. I think, you know, with all things with ethics, there can be different ethical boundaries that can be crossed. And so there can be a lot of different types of red flags. So yeah, obscuring information, that's not a good thing. Privacy can be sometimes a red flag to look out for. So if they don't respect privacy, so like, you know, I'm a nurse again, and all Marquette Method instructors are healthcare professionals. So we all follow the HIPAA privacy rule. So basically, we don't share protected health information outside of whoever it's necessary for. So in our case, it's usually not anybody. So if let's say you're connecting with an instructor and they're like, oh yeah, I taught your friend so and so, like that's kind of a red flag. They shouldn't be telling you names of people they taught, especially if you know them. So that's something to look out for. And you know, if they're being maybe critical of where your background is. So and of course, you know, as a professional, we can turn people away. I should say that. I should just be, you know, we can have a rule of who we teach. You know, like maybe there's an instructor who's only comfortable teaching married couples and they're not comfortable teaching a single woman how to chart her fertility. And I think that's okay to have that, you know, a niche in what you teach and stick to that. But if it's like maybe, for example, an engaged couple and the woman has an IUD, which maybe she plans to get it out, maybe not, whatever. You know, it's kind of like not our concern, but refusing to teach her just on the sake of the IUD and never having a further conversation about that, that could be an issue too. So maybe just kind of making that judgment on surface level without, you know, saying, oh, well, maybe we can teach you natural family planning so that you can know what to do when you get your IUD out. So maybe like digging a little bit more into that. If they, one thing that I have seen sometimes in Catholic communities where there are some people who are really good promoters of natural family planning and they talk about how great it is, but they only talk about how great it is to help conceive or help try to get pregnant. And they never talk about the effectiveness or how well it works for avoiding pregnancy. So sometimes I've just seen in maybe some of those groups where NFP is only seen as something that you can use to help have more babies, and it's like never okay to use to avoid pregnancy. So that's something that's a little bit nuanced. But could kind of, because maybe some, you know, on some sides, it is really helpful to help couples conceive. And you can diagnose health conditions that are preventing conception. And that is a really good thing. But if they totally ignore the avoiding pregnancy side of things, that's kind of something to look out for too. And, you know, along that lines too, if they're not upfront with you about how much abstinence is required of the method, if they're like, oh yeah, it's totally fine, you just have to abstain for a couple of days, or like, you know, you could always like use a backup method or something like that. If it's too much abstinence, that's another red flag because that's not sticking to the method. You know, a natural family planning method specifically has abstinence during the fertile window. And if they're suggesting uses of other ways of having sexual intimacy without having intercourse, and that's a whole nother issue. There's a moral issue as well as an ethical issue there if they're not being very truthful about what the method is and what your expectations are going to be when you're using it as well.
Lauren, this is so good. I love how specific you're getting and giving these specific examples, because I think Sometimes I think in this conversation, you just kind of, you hear code of conduct and ethics, and then it's like, okay, but what are some things that I could look for just as a jumping off point to say, okay, just going beyond a little bit of like, okay, gut check is saying this seems weird, or you're feeling like your boundaries are being overstepped or you're being disrespected. It's like, what are aspects that you can really look to say like, okay, yeah, this doesn't make sense. This isn't aligning with the method that I'm learning and what I'm hoping to get out of this, and just what you've heard about natural family planning and how it's been promoted as well. Are there questions that would be helpful for women or couples to ask when trying to find an instructor? Like, are there I don't know, some type of framework? I haven't seen a lot out there that exists. So maybe you can speak to that as an instructor yourself. Like, what are ways to help identify, like, yeah, I think this could be a good fit, or like, whoa, and kind of incorporating those red flags, hopefully before you're in it and in that relationship, right, and realizing like, wow, this is really bad.
Yes. Yeah. And I think really the most simple question that you can ask is, where were they trained to teach their method? I would just start with that. And that should be a pretty simple question to get an answer to. If you want to ask them if they do have some sort of privacy statement, because I know, again, privacy is another aspect of that ethical side of things. So if they, an instructor, they are allowed to share, like if it's a healthcare professional, they can share a chart that doesn't have any identifying information in a professional manner. So like, if a client shares a chart with me and something unusual is going on and I have questions about it, I'm going to share that chart with other Marquette Method teachers within our secure teacher training forum that we have, where we can connect with other instructors, and we can discuss that chart and come with a best approach for that client. But when a client signs up with me, we tell them that up front. So we have a privacy statement, they agree to it. It has a consent that they give, so that and listed right within there is that, your whole mission instructor might share a de-identified chart for the sake of a case study or gathering that other information. I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but we do have that privacy statement so that you know what you're getting up front. So if you can ask them, do they have something like that where they can tell you how do they use your data? What do they do with that information? And not everybody has that. And I think it's just, you can kind of ask them. If they don't have a statement, you could ask them up front, what do you do with this information? And they can tell you pretty easily what they do with that. I think some other questions, just maybe even to ask yourself, not necessarily that you'd ask them, is just, if you do have friends that have learned a method and they've learned from an instructor, you can ask, how was your experience, and kind of like ask about some of those red flags, especially if it's a friend. That's a nice way to have that conversation about it. But you can ask them too, if you are having trouble with the discernment side of things. So if it's like you want to use natural family planning to avoid a pregnancy, but you're maybe feeling a little bit nervous about that, or you want to make sure that it's really effective, ask them if they have some resources about that discernment, about how to decide how you want to use natural family planning. And if they start giving you advice, like if they start saying, well, tell me your circumstances, I'll help you decide if you have a good reason to avoid pregnancy, that's not good. They shouldn't be doing that. That's something that's outside of their scope of practice. Unless you specifically have that type of relationship, again, like a friend with your instructor, then that's something that they should be giving you a resource for, whether it's someone like they should say, well, I'll talk to a priest about that. Or, if you have a really good friend you can discuss it with, but they should not be saying like, well, here's the list of serious reasons in which you can use NFP. And unless you're within these, I'm not going to teach you to avoid pregnancy. Like I've never heard of a teacher doing that, but like, let's say they were that upfront about it. That would be a question, to ask is just, what's your advice if I need more information about how to discern when to avoid or when to achieve pregnancy? So yeah, kind of some general questions in there, but you can get specific too, if you really want to as well.
I really like that, because I think it's really helping vet that individual any more than, if you're trying to find a therapist or a doctor or a physical therapist, or, someone in the healthcare world that you're going to be working with, to making sure that, not only is this seeming like a good fit, but also like, what do I need to be looking for bigger picture to make sure that, this is going to be someone that is going to respect where I'm at and in the process of learning, especially something, as honestly as sacred as family planning and human sexuality, intimacy. Like, these are big things, and you need to feel respected in a safe space that you can really share these things and learn. And when those are not respected, I mean, that can create some pretty big issues within the relationship. And frankly, it can also cause challenges for you to, as a user, to not want to use NFP, because if you find that you're being disrespected, that can be a total turnoff. And someone thinking, oh, wow, this is just how like NFP is. This is terrible. Like, I'm not going to do this. And so I think I also want to make sure, for those listening, if they're nervous about having a poor experience, or if they've had one, that's something that can be changed, and that's not something that's overarching to a problem that all instructors are responding in that way, acting that way, and navigating, charting with you in that way. Like that's not a normal situation, and it's normal to be respected and to find that your privacy is respected, and that your family life and your process in discernment is being respected too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And kind of, again, like you said, this isn't about just like not jiving with your instructor. It's not like a personal thing. Like, oh, well, they were just, I didn't like their personality, which is fine, because not everybody's going to like everyone. But yeah, it's going above and beyond that. Like, are they just using you as somebody to like convince to have more babies, or like, is there some sort of manipulation going on in their relationship that's going beyond that? Really respecting, again, your ability to make decisions and your ability to discern, like respecting the fact that you're an individual who has the will and the power to decide, what is God calling you to within your marriage, you and your spouse having that freedom to make those good, holy decisions. If they're trying to put their nose into that, that's way different than, just like their personality was a little dry or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's making sure that marriage, that unity, that union is respected, like you said, and that you are being recognized as your own marriage is, you are two individuals who are unique and unrepeatable, and that goes for your marriage as well. And making sure that, again, like they can provide you with resources, or an individual that you can speak to, but they're not just making waves and honing in on your marriage and saying, "Ooh, I see a problem in your discernment. I'm going to help you so you have more kids, or you have less kids." Because I think sometimes too that can also be an aspect where you're thinking, "Oh, it's these people who just want Catholics to have all the babies, and all these people use it and have all the babies." And while children are absolutely a gift and amazing, and they are good, there can also be instructors who may say, like, "I don't want you to have more kids. I don't want you to do this. I think you're irresponsible. I don't think you're good as a parent," and that's not their place.
You're right. Yeah.
That even maybe there are couples where you're questioning their parenting decisions to have more, have less kids. Okay. That's not up to you. You can pray for them as an instructor, but your space, as you've identified throughout this interview, is not to be inserting yourself in that way. That's not your job.
Yeah, exactly. And we really want to be loving, just as individuals, not even as an instructor, but to receive people where they are. I mean, that's really what we need to do, is to say, like, this is where they're at right now. And it's not, we don't have control over other people ultimately. And even if it's something that frustrates you, if it makes you angry, if you see someone telling their story about how many or how few children they have, like, it's really not your problem, even as an instructor. So like, if there are some instructors listening to this, like, it's okay to be angry. Like when you hear a story that makes you angry, but like, I don't know, it tells us in scripture, like, be angry, but don't sin, like it's okay to be angry, but don't take that out and like push that to another level of, really just like, trying to control other people's lives, because that's really going to go beyond what's going to be actually loving for that other person.
That's so good. I love what you said, just like not being in control and just meeting people where they're at. I mean, that's a huge aspect to this, because conversion and change, and it does not happen when we try to like push people into making different decisions. It's really through our opportunities to love people and to just meet them where they're at, and allowing Christ to work through us. Especially, I think, for those listening who are thinking, okay, wow, weird, they're bringing God into this. And that's what we do as Catholics, and we love it. There is that aspect to say, okay, I need to just like love you where you're at, and trust that, God will make waves. He will do what he needs to. It's not my job to try to control the situation. So, getting a little bit more into this, like we touched on this a little bit earlier, as far as, like reporting structure, or like, what do you do if you have an issue? So for someone, you realize that your instructor may not be, or is clearly not respecting your family planning decisions. They're, invading your relationship with their own opinions, not respecting your privacy, manipulating whatever, you might be pulling from, or from that list above that, you clearly laid out with the examples. What do you recommend that a couple does? Like, what
Yeah,
would be
sure.
that next step? Is it working with the instructor? Is it calling them out? Or is it just saying like, I need to go to the next level and just report this? Like, this is so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some level where it is too uncomfortable to speak directly to the instructor, but I think that whenever you can, even if it is a little bit uncomfortable, you should address that instructor first. Because I know if it were me as the instructor, if I did something that, somebody felt was an invasion of their privacy, or if it was above and beyond what I should have been doing, I would rather they tell me first, because maybe I don't know I did it. If they just could say, hey, I was really uncomfortable the way that you said that, maybe could you explain what you meant by that? Or it sounds like you're like, if they're saying to me, it sounds like you're saying that you think that I'm wrong about this, moral issue. Could you like explain more? I would much rather have that than them go like post about it all over the internet and say, wow, Lauren Vitale is the worst instructor. Can you believe what she told me? Like, please, please come to me first. Because I want to learn from those experiences. I want to do better. And I want to be the best NFP teacher in the whole universe. So if you can help me do that by telling me about it first. I don't think that'll happen unless it's by God's will. But if that doesn't work, if you do it, bring it up to your instructor and you say like, hey, you said this thing, it made me really uncomfortable. Can you clarify? And they're like, no, that's exactly what I meant. I think that this is how it should go. And you're like, okay, well, they're not going to change, like this is something that is an issue. I'm uncomfortable with it. And we've already had the conversation. It's not going to help. Then that's where you go up the chain of command. So like we talked about, if there's a professional organization, or if you know where they learned, if they're part of a group. So Giovanni and I, my husband, we have whole mission and we have instructors who work with us. If you had a problem with one of our instructors, you talk to them about it. I really hope that this would never happen, because I think we have a really awesome group of instructors. But should it happen, contact me and Giovanni. And then that's like the next step, right? Because they work with us. I know there's other institutions too that have a few instructors working together as a group. So if you have that peer accountability as well, so that's something that you can look at. So if it's within that sort of professional atmosphere, then go the next step up. Where did they learn? If again, a Marquette instructor, to contact the Marquette University Institute for Natural Family Planning. That's where we learned. They all know who we are. They have our information on file. They can find our email address and call us out if they need to do it. So that's like the next step up. Beyond there, sometimes it's going to be a little bit dicey about what you could actually do. It might just be a matter of like, hey, I have no control over what this person is doing. I'm going to have to just walk away and pray for them. And, just like talk to my friends about it. But if you can, like, try to avoid the like defaming their character, because I just think that's really going to be hurtful, not just for them, but also for you. It's just really, I think we should have outlets, like places where we can discuss these bad experiences, within a proper context. But I think whenever possible, we should handle it the way where you approach them first, then the next set of people that you can contact. Because I've just seen so many bad things happen where the whole story is not out there, and really good instructors have had bad experiences of people just like talking about them. And it's just hard because they can't say anything. They can't speak up publicly. So yeah, I mean, I know this is kind of like, I'm taking it to that personal instructor side of things, but like it's really hard to see that as an instructor, just knowing that instructor cannot speak up for themselves if that's not the whole story. So yeah, work up the chain of command if you're able to, starting with that instructor and then going from there. I don't think anybody would have to contact the USCCB. Hopefully when it get to that point, I don't know if anything would come from that. I think it's better if you do stick small. Where did that instructor learn, and go from there. But yeah, I think that's what I would start with, the instructor, then the next level up, and kind of go from there as well.
I think that makes sense too. You're just going like, okay, the first level working, with the instructor, if that makes sense, and maybe you've tried it and it's not working, okay, go to that next level. And then, from there, like you had said, just in your example with whole mission, like you and Giovanni will take it from there. If it's a major issue, like you're going to take care of it. And, if you need to get even higher up levels involved, okay, so be it. But, starting with the instructor and then to the organization or those in charge, and go from there. I think that, that makes a lot of sense. And just in hearing you explain that too, and just some of the reasons why, I think that's really helpful for, someone listening going, okay, now I have like an actual plan in place. If this is something that you might be currently navigating as you're listening and going, I really need help with this. Okay,
Yeah.
now I have some concrete steps of how I can approach this and navigate it. Before we wrap up on this topic, I'm just curious, bigger picture, how does this issue of ethics impact the movement of fertility awareness, natural family planning as a whole in your eyes and as an instructor and what you've seen?
Yeah, I think mostly it has to do with our integrity and our credibility as um, really as both a ministry and a healthcare service, because, especially within the healthcare perspective, fertility awareness is seen as something that's, I don't know, kind of a joke sometimes. Like, oh, if you're using that to avoid pregnancy, it's going to have like this 25% failure rate, which is an outdated statistic. So ignore that. There's actually some research that disproves that. But, it's seen as a joke sometimes, or like maybe you've gone to your practitioner, your OB-GYN or something, and they say like, oh, NFP, okay, we'll see you in 9 months. It's like a joke that it's not going to work. So I think it's really important that we do need to double down on our ethical standards, because we are credible. We do have integrity, and this is a real thing. And we need to have that consistency among practitioners where we are following an ethical guideline. So if you have a doctor who says, oh, you're learning natural family planning, where are you learning from? Who is this person? Oh, yes, that's a great person. I know that they, respect your autonomy and they respect your privacy. And, that's something that's going to hold us to that higher standard. And unfortunately, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard than even medical doctors, because, it's almost like we need to prove ourselves a little bit, which is tough. But I think that we're worthy of it. I think that we can do it. And it will really make it more accessible. Because if more couples are comfortable coming to an instructor and knowing, hey, this is what you're going to get, this is what the relationship is going to hold for you, that's really going to improve not just the experience of promoting, more couples learning natural family planning, but it's going to help those couples who are learning it feel more confident in what they're doing. And even more personal than that, as the couples who are using natural family planning, it's really encouraging them to have that responsible parenthood, to really be reflecting on what it is that's their call to be parents, and how to be parents and when to be parents. And it's not something that's being forced on them from the outside, like an NFP instructor's personal opinion. Because when someone is making you do something, it kind of takes away your opportunity to be virtuous. But if you as an individual are choosing to do something, then you have an opportunity to grow in virtue. So that's something I think, in general with natural family planning instructors, that, we could see these couples that we know we want them to grow in holiness, again, bringing it back to our faith. But that's the Holy Spirit's work and not ours. And if we can give them the tools to grow in virtue rather than forcing them to try to grow in virtue, that is going to have a better impact on all of humanity, honestly, because when we do have holy marriages and holy families, that's going to improve the whole world.
This is so good, Lauren. That's like a mic drop. What a great way to close out this episode. I think just, seeing that bigger picture, like how does this, yes, it helps the movement, but also it helps marriages. It helps family life. It helps couples in understanding, and women understanding how their bodies work and the gift that it is to have our fertility. And, we hear this more and more, like, okay, your fertility is your fifth vital sign. Like, it's actually a really important aspect of your health. It's true. It is. It's also an important aspect in learning it together as a couple and building out, holy and healthy marriages, and understanding, consent even within marriages, and how to love your spouse well, and making sure that you're taking care of them and you're not abusing them in any way, shape, or form, or manipulation. And just to be able to carry that integrity beyond and with the instruction of learning NFP too. I mean, it's just building out such amazing opportunity for virtue, for building out healthy relationships, and making sure that we are respecting individuals and respecting the dignity of personhood too. It's powerful, and it carries weight. It has an impact in the way in which we live out our lives and engage in relationship, which is really, really amazing. I'm just so grateful that you were on today and just sharing your wisdom. You spoke with such clarity, and I'm just really grateful to have you on and speaking to this topic, because I have seen it coming up a lot more on social media, and also in conversations I have offline with women, where they're just struggling with this topic and figuring out what this looks like. And so I hope this is helpful for those Catholic, non-Catholic, in this space of learning their bodies and how best to approach this relationship and the dynamics of a relationship with an instructor practitioner when it comes to charting and learning their cycles. So thank you so much for being on. It's been awesome.
Yes. Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, and help expand the conversation around women's health. If you'd like to learn more about fertility awareness, visit www.managingyourfertility.com. for more information, resources, guides, and so much more.